Alright everyone, our favorite friends at Salon, you know, that very, very far left neoliberal, actually, rag, largely online, has decided to spin the Manchester attack. You see, it had nothing to do with Islam. It had nothing to do with zealotry. You better sit down for this one, because you'll probably be laughing till your ribs crack. They're declaring it an attack on girls. Yes, that's right. It was just this horrible, I can't remember his name, Salman something or other, dude. He was motivated by a deep hatred of women. Partially true. If you take the Islamic doctrine seriously, women are nothing more than property. It's sort of like the Bible. If you take it literally, women, how are they treated in the fucking Bible? Other than a few kings that are like, you know, the Song of Solomon, you know, the ultimate old granddaddy of all weird erotic texts. Oh, your belly is like honey. Yes, I'm sure he was talking about her belly button and not something maybe 4 or 5 inches below that. I'm sure about that. You look at that, how are women treated? They're treated like fucking shit. You look at the Old Testament, how are women treated? They're treated like fucking shit. Like virgins, you invade some land, you take their virgins, fucking, you know, rape them full of kids, and then you know, continue your line and stuff. That's what weird Middle Eastern religious dogma tends to contain. Now, that means Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and all of their offshoots. You look to the East, it's a little bit different, but then the cultures are very misogynistic in a more real way than in the West. There's really no misogyny left in the Western world. You can complain about it all you want, but then you look at Manchester. Salon's declaring it an attack on women. So what we know is that this very religious individual really hated women. He wasn't a Christian. He wasn't Jewish. He certainly wasn't an atheist. What was he? Let you decide that. I know they like to declare that someone who's a Muslim isn't a real Muslim if they do anything wrong. Oddly enough, they don't apply this to the Westboro Baptists or anything like that. Or when Dawkins or somebody else says something that they can construe as bigoted. Oh, not a, you know, do they come out and say, oh, not a real atheist? No, they say, oh, leader of the atheists, Richard Dawkins, said X, Y, and Z, and we oppose it because of bigotry. Guess what? The most bigoted spot on earth is in the Middle East. You look there. And I feel very, very sorry for the last generation of Muslims that immigrated to the West. Because they immigrated, sometimes under the Reaganite policies of the day. Because they realized that life was better here. Because they wanted to raise their family in safety. They wanted to go somewhere where the pastures were greener. Now they get abused and conflated even by the native population because of the stupid immigration policies of the Western world. And you dare to say that this is an attack upon women. An attack upon girls. No, it's an attack upon Western civilization by a religious zealot. And that's the honest truth. This is a religious zealot. You can talk about interpretation of Islamic dogma all you want. What matters is that this particular individual interpreted it to mean, yeah, you should blow yourself up at the Ariana Grande concert. That's all that matters in the situation. This individual made that decision, interpreted it themselves, or was handed an interpretation by someone that he fucking believed. He believed it, kills himself, blows a bunch of people up with a nail bomb. That's what matters, not how you can potentially interpret the dogma. I pointed out more than a year ago that there are 2 things to consider when we're talking about a religion. Number 1 is the central dogma itself. Can it be interpreted? Can it be interpreted as violent? Secondly, is it generally practiced in that manner? How is it generally taken? When we look at Christendom, we see the evangelical minority within the Western world can get violent, but not usually. Even though they interpret their dogma rather literally, most of the time they're remarkably peaceful. They limit themselves to protesting and holding up signs and chanting Jesus, Jesus, Jesus until it makes you sick in the stomach. But within Islam, those who take that dogma seriously, typically, who are from parts of the world where violence is more culturally acceptable, violence is much, much more common. Thus, liberal Muslims move to the West to try to get away from that shit because they're tired of it and they realize that it's not great. And then we flood our countries with a bunch of people that they tried to get rid of in the first place. They tried to get away from them. It's like the Syrian refugees. Millions of Syrians who are fleeing war come into Europe. And then they decide to take millions more, and caught up in that are a bunch of economic migrants and jihadists, like the one at Manchester, who decide to blow themselves up, to beat people, start rape gangs, and things of that nature. You can argue all day whether that's a legitimate interpretation of Islam. It doesn't fucking matter what some so-called enlightened Western liberal thinks is the proper interpretation of Islam. You're not an Islamist. If you are a Muslim, ISIS is going to call you a sellout and call for your head. They don't fucking care what your peaceful interpretation of Islam is. Oh, we don't do damage to any innocents. No, we don't kill people for being gay. Gay is okay by Allah somehow. You know, just Allah is love. And so, that's great. That's your interpretation. They're not going to take you seriously. See, the problem with Western social justice warriors is they're so self-righteous, they think that their arguments are so self-evident that if they were to present it to some jihadist, that person would lay down their sword and spare their life. It's not going to fucking happen. These people are coming from cultures where violence is a day-to-day occurrence. It's not like your fucking gated community. Where you know, the biggest crime that happened there is some kids were smoking weed, and you gave them a stern talking to about making sure it wasn't laced because you're all for ending the drug war. That's not the way the Middle East functions. It's not the way most of Africa functions. It's sure as hell not the way Central Asia functions. It's just not. You've probably never been there. You don't seem to understand the tribal mentality of groups of people that for thousands of years have fought over small stretches of desert and steppe, or over an oil well, or over a salt mine, or anything else under the sun because it's a badge of honor for them to die in battle. It's like 2,000 years ago within Europe. Only the Western world's gotten a little bit soft and weak, and the social justice warriors really are the worst symptom of that underlying disease. Here's the thing, though. The attack was certainly an attack on girls, insofar as a literal interpretation of this particular religious dogma is misogynistic, to a violent degree. It's not like in the West, where your idea of misogyny is someone catcalled you. I'm sorry, that does not rise to the same level as setting off a nail bomb in a concert and killing 20 people. You can think so, you can think that it makes you oppression, it makes you oppressed, it makes you feel so bad. Okay, you feel bad. I'm sure that those people with nails through their bodies slowly bleeding out on the floor, I'm sure they felt a lot fucking worse than you. And all this silence for Manchester shit. Hold a candlelight vigil. A moment of silence. No, you shouldn't be silent. You know what you should be doing? You should be speaking out against this crap. But you're too cucked to care. A lot of these Europeans are so heavily censored, they can't speak out. And I feel sorry for them. You know, short of a revolution, they can't speak out. They'll get arrested for hate speech or, you know, put in a re-education camp. Oh, well, the older generation of Europeans is responsible for that. Don't just try to blame your governments, by the way. The little people voted in favor of forming this grand EU project. They're the ones that sat by and did nothing as globalism began there. They're the ones that decided to forsake sovereignty, get rid of borders, because they thought government was benevolent. It would actually help them. How small-minded were they? Now all the under 40 Europeans, who are the ones primarily suffering, by the way, when these things happen, those are the individuals. They didn't get a say in it. They weren't around at that time. The EU is quite an old project. It's a failing one, but it's quite an old project at this point. Most young Europeans never got a say in the matter. That's why you need referendums. Because these people never got their say. You need to cut off the head off the serpent before it gets worse. Before they start arguing, oh, this is a European tradition that we all work together and have no borders. That we take in any comers, as long as they're from, you know, the zealot-stricken part of the world. You know, the Western governments, they go in, they bomb like Iraq or something. A bunch of refugees fled out, and they say, oh, we have a responsibility to help these people that we ourselves fucked over. It's a terrible idea. Now, I'll say one thing here in closing. Ron Paul comes out and says, oh, well, Manchester and all these attacks, they're a symptom of a problem of Western interventionism. I agree with that. Yeah, the power vacuum we spawned in Syria, Iraq, and Libya and all these places, it sure helps the zealots to spread. I don't deny that even remotely. But the problem was there before we created the power vacuum. It's just it wasn't as big a problem because there was no power vacuum to be exploited. Don't pretend like there weren't religious zealots in the Middle East before the U.S. showed up. Like it's all our fucking fault. There have been religious zealots for thousands of years in this world. It didn't require... The United States didn't even exist. It was already a problem. People were talking about it being a problem back in the 1700s before our country was even formed. So don't give me that crap about, oh, jihad is a U.S. invention. No, it's not. It was already around. Look at the slave trade back in the day. We're talking early United States. Who was gathering all the slaves to sell them to the Americas? Who was doing it? Oh, that's right. People from Arabia. What religion did they practice? Can anybody raise your hand if you know the answer? Islamic. Because slavery is codified in the Quran the same way it is in the Bible. The difference is a lot of the Christians in Europe at the time, they'd already abolished slavery. There's like, yeah, indentured servitude's okay. You can work someone to death, but you can't actually put them in chains and whip them for small infractions. A mild improvement at best. We had both here in the United States. We had indentured servitude of Irish immigrants, came over on a coffin ship. Oh yeah, I'll give you a loaf of bread, sign this piece of paper. Some illiterate Irish woman signs it. Oh yeah, I'm gonna, have sex with you for the next 10 years and you're gonna make all my meals because that's what you just signed. Joke's on you! And by the way, it's all legal and above board in our courts. Welcome to the United States! It was a pretty bad situation for anybody coming here until fairly modern times. Even now, I feel sorry for the immigrants that come here legally. They get lumped in with a bunch of cartel members because of our stupid immigration policy. Same thing happens in Europe. Salon, it's an attack on girls. Yeah, by a zealot. Why don't you be honest with your readers for once? Salon will never be honest. They'll never come out and tell it straight because they've got an enormous amount of bias. Huge amount of spin goes into every article. They'll never tell the truth. The truth is inconvenient to idiots that run Salon. Never going to tell you what's actually going on in the world. They'd have you believe that there was incontrovertible evidence that like Putin had usurped the presidency and was sitting in the White House right now getting sucked off. While meanwhile Trump is just a pawn or something like that. At the same time, Trump is Hitler, of course. Yes, Hitler is a Russian pawn this time around. It's very, very interesting the way they spin things. Now, as far as this Islamic attack in Manchester goes, no, it was an attack by a zealot. Yeah, disproportionately killed females. I wonder why. It was an Ariana Grande concert. But it was chosen because it was a packed venue. It wasn't chosen because there were a lot of tween girls there. It was chosen because they wanted to kill as many people as possible. For jihad. For their interpretation of Islam. The one that leftists will never understand. They think that from their lily-white colleges, from their ivory spires here in the West, they pore over Islamic doctrine or any other like foreign religious doctrine. They say, oh, how wonderful this is. I'm going to reinterpret this. It's peaceful. I'll make excuses for them. Then when they look at the Middle East, they don't understand why there's violence there. They chalk it up to Western involvement. There was violence there before we were ever involved in any of these nations. People were already butchering one another. There was no NATO. There was no a grand sort of alliance to hold these nations together. There was no semblance of religious tolerance for the most part. There was no concept as the First Amendment, freedom of speech, the right of the people to take up arms to throw off tyranny. My goodness, no, you get butchered, get massacred. It never existed there. It's never been taught to anybody. That's why I would say, yeah, there's a little bit of a problem, and you shouldn't be silent for Manchester. You should speak out for Manchester so that it hopefully stops happening. It'll take a while to deal with the problem. But sitting on your ass lighting a candle isn't going to bring anybody back to life, in all honesty. That's about all. Peace out.